words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, "Let my peace be always with you. Let your mind be calm and open. Let your vital nature be calm and responsive. Let your physical consciousness be a quiet and exact instrument, calm in action and in silence. Let there be my light and power and peace upon you. Let there be ever power, light, and peace. With always our love and blessings, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo." Sri Aurobindo's Savitri. Book 3, the Book of the Divine Mother. Canto 3, the House of the Spirit and the New Creation. Page 317. A mightier task remained than all he had done. To that he turned from which all being comes, a sign attending from the secrecy which knows the truth ungrasped behind our thoughts and guards the world with its all-seeing gaze. In the unapproachable stillness of his soul, intense, one-pointed, monumental, lone, patient he sat like an incarnate hope, motionless on a pedestal of prayer. A strength he sought that was not yet on earth, help from a power too great for mortal will, the light of a truth now only seen afar, a sanction from his high omnipotent source. But from the appalling heights there stooped no voice. The timeless lids were closed, no opening came. A neutral, helpless void oppressed the ears. In the texture of our bound humanity, he felt the stark resistance, huge and dumb, of our inconscient and unseeing base. The stubborn, mute rejections in life's depths, the ignorant no in the origin of things, a veiled collaboration with the night, even in himself survived and hid from his view. Still, something in his earthly being kept its kinship with the inconscient whence it came, a shadowy unity with a vanished past, treasured in an old world frame, was lurking there, secret, unnoted by the illumined mind, and in subconscious whispers and in dream, still murmured at the mind's and spirit's joys.
Tout au fond de l'inconscience la plus dure, la plus rigide, la plus étroite, la plus suffocante, j'ai touché un ressort tout puissant qui m'a projeté d'un seul coup dans une immensité sans forme et sans limite, où vibrent les semences d'un monde nouveau. At the very bottom of the inconscience, most hard and rigid and narrow and stifling, I struck upon an almighty spring that cast me up forthwith into formless, limitless, vast, vibrating with the seeds of a new world.
Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, taken from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo book Letters on Yoga, Book 1, page 338, topic Doubt and Faith. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, I have learned from the experience both of my own mind and the minds of others. The only way to get rid of doubt is to take discrimination as one's detector of truth and falsehood, and under its guard to open the door freely and courageously to experience. All the same, I've started writing, but I will begin not with doubt, but with the demand for the divine as a concrete certitude, quite as concrete as any physical phenomenon caught by the senses. Certainly, the divine must be such a certitude, not only as certitude but concrete than anything sensed by mental thought, but by essential experience. When the peace of God descends on you, when the peace of God descends on you, when the divine presence is there within you, when the Ananda rushes on you like a sea, when you are driven like a leaf before the wind by the breath of the divine force, when love flows out from you on all creation, when divine knowledge floods you with a light which illumines and transforms in a moment all that was before dark, sorrowful, and obscure, when all that is becomes part of the one reality, when the reality is all around you, you feel at once by the spiritual contact, by the inner vision, by the illumined and seeing thought, by the vital sensation, even by the very physical sense, everywhere you see, hear, touch only the divine. Then you can much less doubt it or deny it than you can deny or doubt daylight or air or sun in heaven. For of these physical things you cannot be sure that they are what our senses represent them to be, but in the concrete experience of the divine, doubt is impossible. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, one does not doubt the existence of air because a strong wind is not always blowing, or of sunlight because night intervenes between dawn and dusk. The difficulty lies in the normal human consciousness to which spiritual experience comes as something abnormal and is in fact supernormal. This weak, limited normality finds it difficult at first even to get any touch of that greater and intenser supernormal, or it gets it diluted into its own duller stuff of mental or vital experience, and When the spiritual does come in its own overwhelming power, very often it cannot bear, or if it bears, cannot hold and keep it. Still, once a decisive breach has been made in the walls built by the mind against the infinite, the breach widens, sometimes slowly, sometimes swiftly, until there is no wall any longer, and then there is the permanence. But the decisive experience cannot be brought. The permanence of a new state of consciousness in which they will be normal cannot be secured if the mind is always interposing its own reservations, prejudgments, ignorant formulas, or if it insists on arriving at the divine certitude as it would be at the quite relative truth of a mental conclusion by reasoning, doubt, inquiry, and all the other ignorant feeling and fumbling around after knowledge, these greater things can only be brought by the progressive opening of a consciousness, quieted and turned steadily towards spiritual experience. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, if you ask why the divine has so disposed it on this highly inconvenient basis, it is a futile question. For this is nothing else than a psychological necessity imposed by the very nature of things. It is so because these experiences of the divine are not mental constructions, not vital moments. They are essential things, not things merely thought, but realities, not mentally felt, but felt in our very underlying substance and essence. No doubt, the mind is always there and can intervene. It can and does have its own type of mentalizing about the divine, thoughts, beliefs, emotions, mental reflections of the spiritual truth, even a kind of mental realization which repeats as well as it can some kind of a figure of higher truth. And all that is not without value, but it is not concrete, intimate, and indubitable. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, mind by itself is incapable of ultimate certitude. Whatever it believes, it can doubt. Whatever it can affirm, it can deny. Whatever it gets hold of, it can and does let go. That, if you like, is its freedom, noble right, and privilege. It may be all you can say in its praise, but these methods of mind you cannot hope, outside the realm of physical phenomenon, to arrive at anything you can an ultimate certitude. It is for this very compelling reason that mentalizing or inquiring about the divine cannot be, by its own right, bring the divine. If the consciousness is always busy with small mental movements, especially accompanied as they usually are by a host of vital movements, desires, prepossessions, and all else that vitiates human thinking, even apart from the native insufficiency of reason, what room can there be for a new order of knowledge? For knowledge experiences, or for those deep and stupendous upsurgings or descents of the spirit? It is indeed possible for the mind, in the midst of its activities, to be suddenly taken by surprise, overwhelmed, swept aside, while all is flooded with a sudden inrush of spiritual experience. But if afterwards it begins questioning, doubting, theorizing, surmising what this might be and whether it is true or not, what else can the spiritual power do but retire and wait for the bubbles of the mind to cease? Is it so difficult to see similarly that the divine consciousness must be something infinitely wider, more complex than human mind, filled with greater powers and lights, moving in a way which mere mind cannot judge, interpret, or fathom by the standard of its fallible reason and limited mental half knowledge? The simple fact, says our Lord, is there that spirit and mind are not the same thing, and that it is the spiritual consciousness into which the yogin has to enter. In all this, I am not in the least speaking of the supermind. If he wants to be in permanent contact or union with the divine, it is not then a freak of the divine or a tyranny to insist on the mind recognizing its limitations, quieting itself, giving up its demands, and opening and surrendering to a greater light than it can find on its own obscurer level. This does not mean that the mind has no place at all in the spiritual life, but it means that it cannot be even the main instrument, much less the authority to whose judgment all must submit itself, including the divine. Mind must learn from the greater consciousness it is approaching and not impose its own standards on it. It has to receive illumination, open to a higher truth, admit a greater power that does not work according to mental canons, surrender itself, and allow its half light, half darkness to be flooded from above, till where it was blind it can see, where it was deaf it can hear, where it was insensible it can feel, and where it was baffled, uncertain, questioning, disappointed, it can have joy, fulfillment, certitude, and peace. This is the position on which integral yoga stands, a position based upon constant experience since men began to seek after the divine. If it is not true, then there is no truth in yoga, no necessity for yoga. If it is true, then it is on that basis, from that standpoint of the necessity of this greater consciousness, that we can see whether doubt is of any utility for the spiritual life. To believe anything and everything is certainly not demanded of the spiritual seeker. At every moment of the spiritual life, until one has got fully into that higher light, one has to be on one's guard and to be able to distinguish spiritual truth from pseudo spiritual imitations of it or substitutes for it set up by the mind and vital desire. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says a power to distinguish between the truth of the divine and the lies of the asura is a cardinal necessity for integral yoga. The question is whether that can be best be done by the negative and destructive method of doubt, which often kills falsehood but rejects truth too, with the same impartial blow, or a mere positive, helpful, and luminously searching power can be found which is not compelled by its inherent ignorance to meet truth and falsehood, alike like the stiletto of doubt and the bulging of denial. An indiscriminateness of mental belief is not the teaching of spirituality or of yoga. The faith of which it speaks is not a crude mental belief, but the fidelity of the soul to the guiding light within it, a fidelity which has to remain firm till the light leads it to knowledge. It is perfectly true that reasonings have no force when the vital is in its true poise of love or joy, or active creative power when the vital is depressed. Then it is hard and seems sometimes impossible so long as the depression is there to surmount the trouble. But still, the clouds do not last forever. And even one has a certain power in the mind to shorten the periods of these clouds, to reject and dissipate them, not to allow them to remain until they disappear in the course of nature.
But by all means, use the method of japa and bhakti. I have never insisted on your using the method of dry or hard tapasya, or it was my idea or feeling in your mind that made you lay much stress on it. There are some to whom it is natural and necessary for a time, but each ought to move in his own way, and there is no rule for all, even if the objective is and must be the same contact and union opening to the divine. In the end, these doubts and depressions and despairs must cease. Where the call of the soul perseveres, the response of the divine must come. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, go on the path of yoga without doubt of the ultimate success. Surely you cannot fail. Doubts, they are nothing. Keep the fire of aspiration burning. It is that that conquers.
Prayers and Meditations, June 22nd, 1920. Pondicherry. After granting me the joy which surpasses all expression, Thou hast sent me, O my beloved Lord, the struggle, the ordeal, and on this too I have smiled as on one of thy precious messengers. Before I dreaded the conflict, for it hurt in me the love of harmony and peace. But now, O my God, I welcome it with gladness. It is one among the forms of thy action, one of the best means for bringing back to light some elements of the work which might otherwise have been forgotten, and it carries with it a sense of amplitude, of complexity, of power. And even as I have seen thee resplendent, exciting the conflict, so also it is thou whom I see unraveling the entanglement of events and jarring tendencies, and winning in the end the victory over all that strives to wield thy light and thy power, for out of the struggle it is a more perfect realization of thyself that must arise.